Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers Podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
What is up?
Not too much.
Yeah.
Just here for another podcast episode.
Oh, cool. Me as well.
What are we talking about today?
We have an amazing topic coming, tremendous topic. But before we get started,
Okay.
Just want to give a few shout outs to friends of the show who we've been in touch with lately. Do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Going to shout out to Justin Greek, who has been one of our longest listeners and friends of the show. He's been on the podcast, and he's actually going up to our home away from home.
Adopted home.
Canmore, Banff, Alberta. So have a great trip, Justin. We can't wait to see photos and hear all about it. And of course, thank you so much for being a part of our community.
Yeah, and then also this past weekend we were up in Minnesota, and friend of the show, Keith, sent us quite a few recommendations, so we really appreciate that.
Yeah, and then our final shout out is to Peter, who sent in an email just saying how much he's enjoying the show. He's currently
riding his bike across America.
Yeah, which is spectacular. And he's like, I love listening to you guys while I ride. So thank you, Peter, for emailing. Thank you for listening. It's always really cool to hear that we're a part of your adventures. So
yeah, and so today we are talking about leaving.
On a jet plane, don't know when I'll be back again. No. My singing debut on the podcast.
Yeah, so we are 1 week out as we record this from moving away from Atlanta back to the motherland.
Which is Canada.
That's Canada, yes.
Yeah, and so, getting into sort of the final couple weeks has been a little bit stressful, definitely very emotional, lots of like highs and lows, and coming into the final week just feels really surreal that, we've been down here for as long as we have been and reflecting on everything over the last couple months. And so we wanted to take this time to talk about not just leaving this time around, but just leaving in general, because we've done it quite a few times now. Yeah,
and it's something that I think like most people who go on long backpacking trips have to deal with. You're selling your stuff, you're moving out of your apartment, and you're going away for 4 months or 6 months or a year or something, or maybe you're going to live abroad. And it's kind of this weird feeling where you're like, on one hand, quite excited about going out on this new adventure, but on the other hand, you're kind of maybe a bit sad about things you're leaving behind. Maybe you're a bit afraid about leaving a job, leaving a social circle. Like, are you going to grow distant from your friends? All that kind of stuff. So it's definitely a big part of the travel experience is packing up and leaving.
Yeah, and it's not, we've done it a couple times now, like probably on to time number 4 or something like that. And I feel like it just doesn't really get easier for me personally. Like, I think that there's just always challenges with it. Like, I'm reminded of, what September was like as I pack again now. And I'm like, selling stuff again and packing stuff so that it can all fit in my car so we can get back to Alberta. And there's always sort of this stress, and there's this stress around leaving jobs and saying goodbye to friends. And there's always for me a part of my brain, and I don't know if it's sort of like the ego part or like, that little person that sits on your shoulder and always wonders if you're doing the right thing. But it's like, I know quitting jobs especially is like, am I doing the right thing? Am I making a massive mistake? Is that something you've experienced as well?
Yeah, so I guess we should rewind a little bit and talk about the past couple of years of our lives. If you listen to the show, you kind of know this already, but this is really like the third major move we've made in basically the last 2 years. So
kind of the fourth, really.
So
I guess we returned to Calgary the first time, but
yeah,
the fourth time we've left a place.
Yeah, and the end of 2013, we sold all our stuff, moved out of our apartment, quit our jobs, took off to South America for 6 months. When we came back, we moved to a new city. We're living in Banff, just outside of Banff in Canmore, and really fell in love with living there, stayed there for 15 months, then sold all our stuff, moved out of our place, quit our jobs to come down to Atlanta, and now 9 months later,
doing the same thing.
The same thing over again. So we're getting quite used to it.
Yeah. I think though you can even back up from that and say when we graduated university in 2011, like we packed up the houses that we both lived in for 3 years and we took off on a big trip. Cause I think that was a really hard point of change and leaving for me as well.
Yeah. I think that one had a different tone though for me because it was kind of like two separate things. Finishing university, moving out of our houses with roommates and friends, that was all happening.
Yeah.
And then we decided to go traveling after that. And it was like the end of there was like a transition period where there was this clear finishing university time versus the second time where it's like we actually have to decide. Like there's no coming to an end of a period like there is with the university. It's like, oh, we're going to quit our jobs because we want to go do something else. And then also knowing that you're not coming back too. After that, the first time we left college, we were going to come back to Calgary. We didn't know what we were going to be doing, but that was what we had in our head. So it was just kind of like we're going away, but we're coming back.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. I guess it did have like a little bit of a different tone. I remember it being still really hard for me to sort of separate from that. And maybe it was because it didn't feel like as much of a, I don't know, initiated by me. Like it was like, school's over now. Like you've got to move out of this house. You've got to do something else. Like choose whichever path you choose, but you've got to choose something different than what you're currently doing because you can't keep doing this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So it's almost like because you're not making that decision, you didn't feel like quite ready for it?
Yeah, I think so. Like I know that I can really distinctly remember the last like lunch that I went out for with the 4 girls that I lived with for 3 years and who I'd been super close with my first year. So essentially like best friends with for 4 years of my life and 4 big years of my life. And we walked out of the restaurant and we kind of went into a group huddle and everyone was kind of like fighting back tears. And we said like, our love yous and stuff. And then I got in my car and drove the 30 minutes to my parents' house. My car was so full of stuff. It was just absurd. And just getting into my parents' house and just breaking down and crying. Like it was just a really, really tough transition for me. And I felt this, I don't know, this sort of like, but I've got this other big adventure coming up really soon. Like I should feel really excited for it, but still kind of like mourning the 4 years that had been really fun and amazing for me.
Yeah. It's always, it's always sad, but it's interesting sometimes when it's even like not, like sometimes when you can be so eager to leave something, once it's gone, you're like, oh, I do actually miss some things about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you and I process that type of stuff a lot differently. Like I've already cried a bunch about leaving Atlanta and I'm like, how are you feeling? You're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll see how I feel next week. Like I'm not too sure.
So this is something we've talked to a lot of people about where it's like we seem to operate on different time horizons where you're like at least a few weeks ahead of me. And I think we've come closer together on that.
Yeah, we've really balanced each other out a lot.
Today's really the first day, I think. Yesterday and today. So yesterday was a Friday. We're leaving on this upcoming Sunday. So we're 8 days out now. Today's a weekend. I'm like, wow, this is like it. Basically, there's 1 week left. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy to think that this, 9-10 month adventure is coming to a close. It's interesting to think about how when something sort of forces you to make a change though versus choosing to make that change. Like we've talked to quite a few people on the podcast who have been let go from jobs or have had something happen in their life that kind of pushed them or forced them to almost choose something different, and then they've chosen travel. And that's kind of how after university was for us. Like we didn't have to choose travel, but we had to choose something different than university because we were finished with that degree. Yeah.
And that's a similar thing right now with this decision. The reason we came down to Atlanta, it was only going to be temporary. I got a work visa. It ended in June. So
ends in June. It's not over yet.
Yeah, it's listeners with the Customs Department. My visa is currently still functional.
Yeah. Just want to clarify that.
But yeah, this one is like, it's ending from the start. Versus, I think the thing that's often tough is that it's sometimes hard emotionally when you don't feel like you're ready because someone else is making the decision for you. So like whether it's a work visa coming to an end, or college coming to an end, or maybe even you get fired, like you're not ready for it. So it can be like emotionally a bit hard. You don't want to let it go, but it's going anyways, versus you actually making the decision to do it, because that's when things are cloudy. So it's funny. It's like harder in some ways, but easier in some ways. And we've talked to so many people who have gotten laid off and gotten fired, and that's been like the impetus for them to go do this awesome trip, because it is a lot scarier when you're the one responsible for the decision and you're like, can I really quit? Can I really move out and do all this stuff?
Yeah, definitely. And you're definitely right about our time in Atlanta. I mean, I'm here as a tourist. There's only so long I can be here as a tourist. At some point, I'm not allowed to be here anymore. Like, it's the law that I've got to go home. So I don't know. I think that's part of what has driven a lot of my feelings. Like when people ask me, are you excited to go back home? And it's like, well, yeah, like things are easier at home for me because I'm not in this country that has all these restrictions against me. I'm in my home country and I have a lot more freedoms. But at the same time, am I ready to actually leave Atlanta? Like, not really. It took me so long to build a community here and make friends and kind of find my path. And I feel like I'm in a good rhythm now, and then it's going to like all be shaken up and kind of shattered into pieces. And then I have to find that again when we're home. Mm-hmm. And that's something that is really challenging about choosing to go on a big trip or coming to a fork in the road where you have to choose something different.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about on other episodes how we feel that it's been really valuable for us to move to new cities, because you get to go through this experience of making first impressions and making new friends, and you can really kind of like express the changes in yourself. So like if you're changing over time but your friends stay the same, the friends kind of always expect the same version of you. Whereas if you change and you meet new people, they don't expect anything other than the person they're meeting right there. So there's a lot of value to making a new social circle and to being in a new city, and it provokes you to grow in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so as we've...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, as we've moved from city to city, it seems like we've found kind of like more and more of a home in certain ways.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good point.
It's like becoming harder to leave as we kind of find this more and more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense to me. I think that it's always really interesting to me how, you meet somebody in one realm of your life and they obviously have an impression of you or they interpret you a certain way, and thinking about how everyone that you've ever encountered, how they interpret you so differently at different stages in your life. And it's so true. I mean, it's one of the toughest things about family. They expect you to be the person that you've kind of always been. And then if you change, it's like, well, what's up type thing.
Yeah, they look at you funny.
Even it can be things as simple as changing your diet. I know an example that comes to my mind is one of my uncles makes this dip made of ground beef and Velveeta cheese and salsa. And like, it's grossly good. It's something I would never eat now. Like if he made it, I would be like, I'm sorry, I just can't put that in my body. Like I just have a different concept of nutrition and how I value myself personally, and I won't eat that. But years ago, Ryan and I were like, this is amazing. Like this is so good. And I think there was one year where I had to be like, I'm actually okay. And it's like, people do things year after year because they want to please you or they want to make you happy or they know that you like something, and then it's all of a sudden you change and it's kind of a shock to them. And so that can be a hard situation to sort of deal with when you come back from something and you're different, or you go back to a social circle and you've changed because you've had different life experiences.
Yeah. So what do you think the big fears and emotions that come up when you're about when you're debating leaving a city or in a social circle and going on a big trip or trying to move somewhere new?
I think that for me, one of the consistent fears that I've had is a fear of being sort of like forgotten about or replaced within my social circle.
What do you mean by that?
Sort of like, you know, if you're a piece of this sort of this puzzle or this group and then you remove yourself. So I think about specifically, we came back from our trip after university. We were in the same city for 2 years. We kind of hopped back into the same social circle, like very core members of it. Like we attended events and hosted events and stuff like that. And then we extracted ourselves from that. And so I think that was a positive move. I think that there's a lot of benefits from that. And I'm still friends with a lot of those people. I think they're great people. But I think for us, it was a good move to move away from that. And, you know, as we were leaving, it's like we're on a plane to Colombia and I'm like, things aren't going to be the same when we get home. Like, when you remove yourself from something like that, things will never be exactly how they were ever again. And there's sort of this like mourning period for the way something was, even if you know that change is good. Does that make sense to you?
Kind of.
I feel like we process stuff so differently that I'm not sure if you've experienced that as much as me. But I think definitely a fear of my friends forgetting about me or finding a new Amanda to insert into their social circle that's like cooler and fun and isn't going to go traveling and stuff like that is sort of an irrational fear that I've dealt with.
Yeah, I think for me, focusing on that specific time, that was we'd finished university, come back from our first trip, worked for basically 2 years in our first like real kind of career-ish jobs.
Big kid jobs, as I like to call them.
And I definitely had like quite a bit of anxiety about like career stuff.
Yeah.
Like I don't really have much experience. I don't have much experience. I don't have many skills. Can I get a job when I come back? Like you feel kind of like small and it's like as if it's like a really large risk for you to leave.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I think it's something that I kind of worried about as well, is this idea of having like a gap on my resume or getting behind in the workforce. And I know it's something we've talked about on other podcast episodes where it was something that was kind of told to us in business school is like, you got to get ahead of the rat race. Like you don't want to be in the pack of rats. Like you want to be ahead. And when you take these big breaks, you're not getting ahead, you're getting behind. And that's even worse than being like in the pack. So I think it was something that crossed both of our minds. Like our jobs weren't bad. They paid well. Our living situation was comfortable. Like we weren't really in a bad situation.
Yeah. And if you went down the checklist of what makes a good life from the outside, it was all there. Good. Like, you know, we had an apartment, we were in a relationship, we had a social circle, we were making decent money. All the things that you could look from the outside and see. Like, okay, they've got all the like bottom level needs met.
Yeah. I think that's why it was hard for a lot of people to understand why we chose to leave all that. And, you know, we gave up this like really well priced, good location apartment and sold all our furniture and we quit these jobs and went to South America. And I feel like people really did not really understand it because from the outside looking in, it was like, well, everything's perfect. Like, why would you want to give this up? Like, that just seems silly. And I think that that's, if anyone else out there is kind of like going through that, you're definitely not alone. It's something that we've gone through a couple of times and it can be hard, but you've really got to kind of stick to your guns and trust that you know what's best for yourself, I think. Like there was something about, I wrote a letter to one of my best friends and I was like, I can't put into words why I need to go, but I need you to understand that I need to go. And that's the only way I could describe it to her, is I just couldn't put into words why I needed to leave.
So that's one of like the toughest parts when you have grown really close to someone, like your best friends, and you feel something inside of you that's unfulfilled about your current life, and you think going off and doing something else would be exciting, and it kind of makes you feel like there's a possibility there to feel more alive. But on the other hand, you're like really sad about leaving your friends, and loyalty to friends is like such an important thing. So is that kind of the conflict where you feel like you're doing something wrong almost by kind of like abandoning your closest friends that you're supposed to be loyal to?
Yeah, in a way. And it's also like, I felt the need to clarify that like it's me, it's not you type thing. Which,
so it feels like breaking up almost.
Yeah, kind of. And I mean, it's like, it's not like we actually broke up. I mean, we were never actually dating and our friendship is still strong, but I just felt this need because we were really close. Like we played on the same slow pitch team and we emailed every day and we did a ton of yoga. Like she was a really good like yoga friend to me, and we hung out constantly and had really like fun girls nights. And it's hard when you're that close with somebody, and that part of my life was good. But I was like, I'm not willing to live like a 6 out of 10 life. Like, so this aspect's good, but there's other things that aren't good, and I need everything to be great or I'm not really going to be happy, I guess, is sort of that. But yeah,
do you think it's that?
I
like,
felt bad.
Do you think that it's I need everything to be great, or is it more just like I need to find out like what else is out there? Because I think that's a big thing too. It's not necessarily that, like going and doing something different is better, but there is like something about being a human that you kind of crave novelty in some ways.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. Like, there was times where I was like, is this it? Is this how I'm going to live my life forever? Like, you know, we were both feeling kind of unfulfilled in our jobs, and we came home and our quote unquote quality time was like watching TV and like eating dinner in front of the TV. And
yeah, all the habits weren't like not healthy, but like they weren't enriching. Like they weren't making anything better. They were just kind of like,
yeah, I kind of felt like I was just floating along. Like it felt like there was no depth to my life. Like, you know, I would look forward to things on the weekend, or I'd plan like fun events with friends, because for the most part I was like fairly unfulfilled. And it's something I've said time and time again on this podcast. Like when you do the math on not enjoying, you know, 2 or 3 days of your week, like that's a large portion of your life that you're not happy with. Yeah.
And so it's funny though, like focusing in on that period of time right before quitting to go to South America, it's like, it's easy to look back now and say like, wow, that was a really smart decision to quit, to leave, and then to go do something else after. But at the time it wasn't very obvious, and it was like pretty scary.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point actually, because we didn't have crystal balls that told us what the future was going to be like and what we were going to get out of South America. So, I mean, it's kind of just like, okay, this travel thing was really enriching the first time. It'll probably be really great the second time. And I don't know. I think it definitely crossed my mind. Like, am I making a bad decision by quitting this job that like pays pretty good? I had good benefits. You know, I had a lot of responsibility. Like life wasn't really like bad in terms of the career thing. It just wasn't great. And so it definitely crossed my mind. Like, you know, I could probably do this for another year and then get like a different position in an industry I was interested in. But I think I was just really uncertain as to what I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't want to do what I was doing. And I remember looking at like volunteer positions and master's degrees and postgraduate stuff. I was just like searching for something that was different than what I was doing.
Yeah. So I remember feeling nervous about leaving that first time. And it was kind of in the pre-commitment stage. So like before quitting the job, before deciding that we weren't going to re-sign our lease. That was where it was like, I don't know. But then once I did do it, like I remember that day going in to my boss's office, quitting. I came out of there and was just like, back.
Yeah, that's actually another distinct memory that I have is when you came home. And
I was just like,
you told me
it was
like
giant weight off my shoulders.
yeah, like you had been in a really, really bad place for a number of months by that point. And I remember being like, wow, like I think this is going to be good for Ryan, good for me, good for us as a couple. Because it was the first time I seen your face like truly light up in so many months. Yeah, it's so ingrained in my head, that moment of happiness.
So let's jump ahead to the next leaving experience. We came back from South America, moved to Canmore, and we're like, we're going to stay a short period of time. The short period of time kind of expanded because we were enjoying it. And then that one was funny because this move down to the States was very uncertain. Basically until I was like at the airport.
On the airplane?
Basically on the airplane. I was like, okay, this is actually happening now. And that uncertainty really kind of changed a lot of the feelings that were involved.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting coming back from South America. Neither of us was really ready to come back, but we had certain obligations and reasons for coming home. And we came home and decided we didn't want to live in Calgary anymore. So we moved to the mountains. And it was definitely intended to be short term. I mean, we signed a 1-year lease, not really with any intention of actually keeping that lease for the entire time. There was no penalty or fee for breaking it. So we're like, whatever, we can just do this. We'll figure it out as it goes. And we were going to go teach English in China or something like that. And we got jobs and we started exploring the area and meeting people. And we were like, damn, this place is kind of cool. And ended up staying for like 14 months. So that was an interesting leaving situation as well. Like we knew we were leaving. It was either Atlanta or Central America. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't really like leaving or not leaving. It was just like, where are we leaving to? What is this leaving situation going to look like? And I mean, I'm super grateful that you got through and that we came down to Atlanta. I feel like it's changed my life in a lot of ways. And I think that that's something that's really interesting, is that life takes you on these paths that you never really expect when you're younger. You can never really predict where life's going to take you. And I feel like for me, it's like I've really left pieces of my heart all over the world, which is what makes leaving really hard, I think. Does that resonate with you? I don't know if you leave.
What do you mean leaving pieces of your heart?
Oh, you and I, so different.
Too abstract for me.
Like, there's a piece of my heart that's in Atlanta. There's a piece of my heart that's in Canmore.
Like a, what's that called?
Not like
Crux?
Not like a Voldemort, like separating my soul type thing, and not a literal piece of my heart, but it's like when you find somewhere where you meet really cool people and you do something that's fun and you connect with that place. It's like, wow, I could, maybe live here forever. Like this place kind of feels like home for me. And when somewhere feels like home, it makes it harder to leave. Mm-hmm. And so I know like saying goodbye to Canmore was just like, I'm focusing on the road obviously, but I'm staring into my rear view and side mirror trying to get like last glimpses of the mountains. And I don't know, it was a hard place to leave. Like, even when I left Lululemon, like, I was just such a sobbing mess. The last, 10 minutes of my shift. Which is kind of funny, but I don't know. I'm starting to tear up right now. Goodbyes are really hard for me. Leaving's hard for me, yet it's something I continue to do.
So what do you think is what's on the other side of the sadness that makes it worth it?
I think that change is good. Shaking things up. We did an episode on death by routine, I think is what we called it. I really do think that as humans, we're programmed to be habitual and find routines. And it's a beautiful thing in a lot of ways. If we didn't have these habitual patterns in our brains, there's things like brushing your teeth or tying your shoelaces or walking or driving a car that you would never remember how to do that allow us to function really smartly throughout the day. Yet there's also this part that it programs in us these things that we you know, you eat popcorn 3 nights in a row. And the 4th night, you're like, kind of like salted out, but I kind of still want it because like my body's telling me we did this 3 times in a row and I want to do it a 4th. And I think that it's really easy to get stuck in routines. I think that we're programmed to try and find routine. And I think routine can also be really good if you do it in a healthy, smart way. Yet, it's good to shake it up. So I think that that's part of it, being outside of your comfort zone. And I think the adventure aspect of it. I also think about how in each new place I've lived and each place I've traveled to, especially in the last couple of years, I don't know, I feel like I keep like meeting these people that I have this like really deep connection with. And I'm like, where have you been my entire life? Like, I feel like I've known you forever, yet we just met. And I'm so grateful for those experiences and that have brought me to meeting these people that I may have never met if I'd stayed in Calgary. Had I never left Calgary, I would never have met these people or that sort of thing. Like, people really make a place. I know there's a lot of loaded stuff in there.
But so, no, I think that's a really good point. That like, as you kind of continue to go through experience in life, you kind of learn more about yourself. And then when you're going to a new place, you kind of get to, I don't know, there's kind of like a curve to finding a new community. Like when you first move somewhere, it's like ding, 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 meet people. Like there's a steep slope, and then it kind of like flattens out over time. Because once you're here, you've been here a few months, you know a bunch of people, you've got all these time commitments. You can't, it's like a lot more effort you have to put into actually meeting new people.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you're moving to a new place and you have a better understanding of what you value in a friend, what you care about for yourself, it's like easier to meet people who are closer to you.
Yeah, that's definitely something that resonates with me. I think thinking about both moving to Canmore and then leaving Canmore and then moving to Atlanta and now leaving Atlanta, it's like, you know, you don't know anyone when you first get there, and then you spend time meeting people and getting to know people, and then it's like you build these friendships and these relationships and this community, and then you leave.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of becoming more and more something that I'm aware of. Like, I think when we left to go traveling the first time, I was kind of sad about this like end of college experience and like leaving behind a friend group. But I was also excited about doing that, and the second time as well. This third time, I was excited about this possibility. And still now, I'm excited about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But I think as you get older, you're kind of worried about like building a community of people you really care about and wanting to spend more and more time with those people who you really connect with on like a values level. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, like I was saying before, travel is really cool because you meet these people who you just connect with so deeply in all corners of the world, but then you do that a couple times over. And I think about, you know, the people that I've become closest with in the last couple of years. I mean, I've got a really close friend who's in Australia. I've got a really close friend who's in Macau, China. I've got, you know, a couple of really good friends who still live in Alberta, and I've made a really good friend who kind of moves around the U.S. She's currently on a goat farm in Northern California, but based out of Montana. And then I've made a really good friend down here. And so it's like your community becomes really spread out. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yes, I've got this really great community, but like, is my community ever going to all be together and be each other's community? Probably not. Which is kind of the con of forming your community all over the world. And it's something I know we talked to Jake DeSillis about this, and he said that is one of the negative things about like expatriating and doing sort of like permanent travel is that you meet amazing people who you just like instantly connect with, and it's like deeper level right off the get-go, or pretty quick off the get-go, but then, you know, that person is somewhere that you're not going to be forever because you don't really have a forever home. So
yeah, it's funny when I was thinking about what would be a good metaphor for this kind of like friendship building all over the place. I was like, maybe Hungry Hippos? Like, you're going out, you're collecting balls.
What?
Forget that.
Oh my God, that's so good.
But yeah, it is weird when you got people you connect with, but they're all over the place.
Yeah.
And you're like, how, because I think it is, at some point in the future, I'd like to really live around a bunch of people who I really care about.
you need to like buy an island and convince all of our friends to move to our island. And then boom, that's how we're going to do it. But in all seriousness, like, yeah, I agree with that as well. And it's something that it's the one like part about like this travel lifestyle where I'm like, you know, can you do this forever when you just consistently meet like really amazing people, but they're all over the world?
Yeah. Do you think you're noticing that you're maybe less eager to leave places as time goes on? Like, it felt for me a year ago, like, I just want to keep traveling, going new places all the time. And then over the course of the last year, I've kind of like seen myself feeling like a little bit more comfortable with the idea of staying in one place for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think that's something I've experienced as well. I think part of it is getting older and not like enjoying staying out late and like eating unhealthy and having your whole routine sort of disrupted. It becomes like more uncomfortable to think about that.
One thing I'll add though, I think this is a big thing as well. We are like growing farther away from this experience of a long-term, solely travel-focused trip. And it's like you maybe lose a little bit of what that was like in your mind.
Yeah, I think you forget how free it is to be on the road. You forget what it's like to have an adventure every single day. You forget what it's like to be in a new city every couple weeks or every couple days, depending on how fast you travel.
And it's like, at least for me, I've spent a large part of the last 2 years really having a lot of stuff on my mind, a lot of like stuff on a to-do list kind of all the time.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about traveling is kind of being mentally free.
Yeah.
As well as like geographically.
Yeah. I think too, like as I get a little bit older, we talk like we're super old, like we're not even barely past 25. Couple years past 25. But I don't know. I feel like it gets harder and harder for me to say bye to people. And I think that's one thing. Like just thinking about saying goodbye to my like Atlanta bestie is like, I can't even think about it. It just makes me feel too sad. So, and it's got to happen like really soon.
So you're kind of like welling up thinking about it, but what are the exciting things about leaving this time?
I think so. We're taking a really big road trip through the US, which really excites me. There's always excitement to going like home. Alberta will always be like home for me. So going back there is always, it's stressful. It's got its anxiety inducing things, but it also makes me feel happy. And then thinking about what's next, which is something we were talking about on the last episode that we released, our celebratory 100th episode, where we've got this adventure to Central America that's coming up. And so it's things like that remind me why I'm leaving. You know, that and the fact that I actually can't stay here. So, the exciting future adventures in the U.S. government. What about you?
So on the exciting side of it, it's definitely taking this next step with the podcast and being able to work on that more often.
Yeah, like building a business and like really pursuing our dreams is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I am excited to go explore new places. I think that's something that I have kind of forgotten about a little bit. Like the few times you've taken weekend trips, It's been like, oh, this is fun. Like it's really, it makes you feel like a little bit more alive when your surroundings are a little bit different. And I think it makes time feel like it's slowing down.
Yeah, you get like stimulated by things you've never seen before. So you're like morning, instead of doing the same commute every single day, it's like you see new things that kind of come into your brain as like fresh and new and then more exciting.
Yeah. So I think that I'm going to be maybe a little bit surprised by how good I feel once we do start getting out and going, because I think I'm like intellectually forgetting a little bit about how awesome it is.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's like the key sort of like, I guess, topic of this episode is that like leaving is hard. And from my experience, it doesn't get any easier. It's been hard every single time I've done it. Regardless of where I've done it from, it's been hard. It sucked. But then when you've got something that's really exciting to look forward to in your future, or you're going on some great adventure, that's why it's worth it. Like being outside of your comfort zone is so fulfilling, and having the chance to meet new people and experience new things and have new adventures is so amazing.
Yeah. And it is kind of funny because you talked about it earlier about how like it's not going to be the same when you come back. And I think that is true. But I think in a lot of ways, it's like when you go out and do something new, you change more than the surroundings that didn't go out and do something new. They kind of just kept doing the same thing.
Yeah, something that actually just like clicked with me, and I'm not sure if like listeners who have listened to a bunch of the episodes connected with, but I remember when we did Coming Home After a Big Trip episode on that, talking about how everything's the same. And I feel like I completely contradicted that in this episode. And I kind of want to dig into that because it's like things are the same, yet you're different.
So the situation's different.
So the situation's different. And I think that's the important thing. Like I remember when we quit our jobs while living in Calgary and went to South America, I think about, my friendships, and something that me and my really like good friends talked about is how, it'll never really be like this again. We're never going to really, me and my friend who were emailing every day about how much we hated our jobs. Like we're never going to be in this exact situation bitching about these crappy jobs ever again, because I'm not going to be working this crappy job. And, like in that sense, you're never going to be in the same situation with the same mindset, because travel changes you. Yet you come back and it's like you're really different, and you feel like everyone else should have changed or progressed in some way, yet everyone seems to be the same.
Well, yeah, and that's obviously a perspective issue.
Yeah, it's something that I've really had to correct myself with, and I know it can kind of get you into sort of this mindset of almost like you're better because you've traveled. Like, oh, why are you so the same? People progress and change even being in the same situations. And I think that that's something that I've really learned, is that just because I'm different doesn't mean I should think of everyone else as being the same, because they've probably changed some viewpoints or something about their lifestyle or friends or jobs or something like that makes them different as well.
Mm-hmm. So something that keeps coming to my mind as we're talking about this is a conversation I had with a friend here in town about us leaving, going off to do something else. And we were kind of talking about their situation. Were they happy with what they were doing? Did they want to do it long term? Had they ever thought about like going traveling or going on some sort of adventure, moving to a new city? And it seems like a very common thing where the response is like, yeah, I've definitely had that idea. Like travel is such a big kind of cultural meme that I think most people who are young have considered that at some point. Yeah,
definitely, like, especially in like the millennial Gen Y.
Yeah. And there's certainly nothing like it's not necessarily better to go traveling, staying in a good situation where you're building a community and like building good skills. Like that's obviously very, very valuable experience. But a lot of times it seems like the situation young people get in is it's like just fine at home. It's like, mm-hmm. I'm comfortable, like I'm making money, my job's decent. Like for us, I think we both kind of felt, we've talked about this before, but it's like that first experience of going traveling was like this really like eye-opening experience of like, this is what it can feel like to be like really, really enjoying life.
Yeah.
And then going back into an office, which was like generally fine, was kind of like slightly unbearable.
Yeah.
But without that experience to contrast it to, it may not have seemed so unbearable. It's kind of like, this is what life's about. You know, you just do stuff that you don't want to do. And then on certain days you do stuff you do want to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of this like flip flop of like burdens with like freedom. And so we were talking, and he was kind of bringing up that he's had this idea, but things are really good, learning a lot of skills, like doing really well career wise, but has this fear of like, you know, what if I just keep doing this and then I'm like 30 in my 30s, and that's like,
I was thinking like 50. Like, I feel like it's really easy to wake up and be like, where did my life go?
Yeah. Like you get to a point where you're like, like that was, you know, that was like good, but it wasn't like, I didn't like get to see like a full spectrum of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that even when like making these decisions about if you want to go somewhere new, if you want to quit and go traveling, if you want to maybe go live abroad for a period of time, like you're never going to know for sure if it's the right decision in the long term.
Yeah.
You may not be able to come back to the way things were before. It may be even worse from like an objective outsider standpoint. But there is something to going through those experiences and to living on this like spectrum and living on different areas of the spectrum, you know? So like there's something to, it depends on your philosophy on life, but I think from both of our outlooks, we're really about just trying to live a life that's full of experience and full of all the options that you could experience in life. So that's necessarily not full on happy life. Like there's going to be times where it's sad and you just want to like ride the full wave of possibilities. And so change is like crucial for that, for injecting new experience and for injecting new feelings. Like on one hand, there's this like strong force inside of you that's pulling you towards comfort. And that says, my job's good enough. I've got some good friends here. I don't want to leave. My apartment's nice. It's like warm here. And that there's this force pulling you towards comfort, but then you kind of can grow numb over time if everything's too comfortable. So sometimes when you're in that point where you're thinking about, I don't know about this decision, like it's this thought that's always been lingering in my mind, but there's this aspect of comfort that I'm really happy with. Sometimes for us, we both decided that we're not really going to respect that pull to comfort yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope that like never am I really just like choosing things because it's the easier or the more comfortable decision. I think that leaving is probably the harder decision. It's scary. It's uncertain. It's sad. And there's a lot of things that make it harder, but there's also with that come a lot of things that make it more fulfilling. So I hope that that's like, that I always choose something that pushes me to grow as a person and pushes me to continue to get to know new people and explore new things, so that I'm never just like comfortable with the way life is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that sort of covers where we're presently at with, you know, our 1 week left in Atlanta, which will be less than that by the time this episode actually gets out, and talking about sort of what's next for us and reflecting on our feelings about leaving this time around and leaving in the past. If there's anyone out there who is currently in a similar situation to us or has a situation where they're leaving somewhere to head out on a new adventure, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, share your story with us. We always love to hear from people, and that's info@theworldwanders.com if you want to share.
Yeah, or you can find us on Facebook at The World Wanderers and send us a message.
Yeah, definitely. We always love to hear from people who are listening to the podcast. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.